another video going in depth about how to properly use spray paint and some techniques. I highly recommend you watch that before you go and do the stencils here. My name is Peatr Thomas. Today we're going to be painting one of these canvases. What you're going to need is some spray paint, paint marker if you have. Sharpie works just as well. If you're painting indoors, you definitely want one of these. It's a respirator. If you have a paper mask, it'll be okay if you have like open windows or if you're in a garage. You want some gloves. If you have one of these, a water-based spray paint, it's also good indoors. You also need a canvas, and I'm going to be using stencils today. You could find me in another video where I'll show you how to make these stencils. If you have an apron, you might want to wear that just in case you get paint on your clothes, or you can turn your shirt inside out. So whenever you do any kind of painting, you always want to start with your background first. For this one, I'm going to do like a sunset. So I'm going to start with the orange first. And I always like to get the edges as well. And I like doing the yellow after the orange so that it kind of mists over the orange like that. You don't want to go too thick with the paint, otherwise it'll take way too long to dry. So if you have a fan nearby or like a hair dryer, it'll help your canvas dry a lot quicker. So the next thing you want to do, if you want, to do some clouds. I don't always do clouds, but maybe today we'll do some clouds. I'll just do that for now. So the next thing, I have some idea of what I want to do, but I'm more or less just kind of winging it. I like doing it that way because if it doesn't turn out the way I expected, then I'm not disappointed with it. So once you have a stencil in place where you want, you're going to want to cover the exposed edges, because what's going to happen is you're going to get some off spray. For example, I'll show you in this corner right here. Let's say the stencil is right here. If I spray that, what's going to happen is you'll get some off spray. So when I lift this, you can see it right there, and that's something you want to avoid. You could find some scrap paper. I have one more poster board left over here, so I'm just going to rip off some pieces. So now that I have some pieces, you want them to be underneath the stencil. Reason being, if you have it over top and you spray your stencil, sometimes the paper can lift and you'll still get some off spray under there. So it's always better to have it underneath. To hold it down, you could use the cans that you're not using, so just like this, so that your stencil doesn't move when you spray it. Now when you spray your stencil, you don't want to spray at an angle like this. You want to spray over top as much as you can. You don't want to do a long spray like that, because what's going to happen is the paint is going to puddle up. And once it puddles up, it might seep underneath your stencil, and it'll also take a lot longer to dry. So what you want to do is just give it some really light sprays like that. And a little bit goes a long way. I don't want to go a solid white, so I'm just going to do that much. And when you take your stencil off, it's just as important as spraying it. And you want to try to move it as little as possible when you lift it, so that you don't smear the wet paint. And there's our first stencil. Next thing I want to do, I actually want to put some stars in the background. I should have did that before the clouds, because you want to work your way forward from the back, right? What I'm going to do with the can is I'm going to use 2 fingers to push down as light as possible. And what's going to happen is the paint is going to start spurting out. You might want to practice this onto something else or on the side. Start on the side, then swing your way over. And then what's happening is the paint is just and it's spurting out like that, and there's some stars. Another way to do it is you can spray this into a tiny cup, just a little bit, dip your finger in there, and then flick it onto the canvas. So I'm going to go ahead and start on the bottom part. I know the top is not dry as much, but I'm not going to be laying the next part down onto the wet area. So I ripped off these little pieces, and I'm actually going to use this edge to make some of the landscape here. So for this, I'm not going to lay it flat. I'm just going to lean it onto the canvas like this, not pushing it on the back where it's already wet. So again, you don't want to go too heavy with the paint. Kind of give it some light spurts. and lift it up. I'm gonna grab a different piece of paper and I'm gonna do the other side. Now once you place this down, you don't want to move it, because what you're gonna end up doing is smearing the area that you already painted, like what I just did right there. I'm gonna grab a different piece. There we go. A better way to do this is to wait until your canvas completely dries. With spray paint, it only takes maybe up to 5 minutes to dry if you have a fan nearby. Because I didn't wait for it to dry, it ended up smearing a little bit, and that's fine. I'm just gonna leave that. So now we can wait for this to dry. So the next stencil I'm gonna use is this guy right here. I think I'm gonna place him right there, so he's somewhat center. Get my off spray protection right there. Put some cans to hold it down. I pick a can up, I always give it a couple sprays, because sometimes what comes out is some transparent spray, and you don't want that. Now sometimes people will want to leave the stencil in place while it's drying. Bad idea, because if the paint seeped underneath and you let it dry, when you pick up the stencil, it's going to take a chunk of paint with it. Okay, lift that. And there is our Sitting Bull in the sunset. Next, I want to kind of give this star just a little bit of a halo kind of look. And so for this one, I'm only giving it a light spray. I'm not going to put the overspray sheets underneath, but you still want to hold it down. And when you take the pieces of paper off, you want to take it off in the order that you put them in, but reverse, just like that. So now with my black paint marker, what I'm going to do is add some details, but also fix up some of the things, like this part here. And I'm just going to use my marker to make some teepees here. I could have also made a stencil of these as well, but because they're going to be so small, I figured I'd just draw them with the marker. And maybe I'll put one more. Just like that. And there you go. So after you're done using your stencil, you want to place it somewhere where it's not touching anything else, because what you don't want is them to be stuck together with another piece of paper or stencil. So whenever I'm done using them, I kind of like to just have them spread out like this until they're done drying. And then once they're done drying, you want to keep them somewhere flat. Reason being is you don't want the paper to end up curling up on you. And that's pretty much it. Important things to remember: wait until the paint dries before you add another color. Be mindful of your off spray, that can really ruin your painting, but again, it's not ruined. You just have to wait for it to dry, then you paint over it again. And just have fun with it. That's all it really is. Experiment with different stencils. You can always flip them and reverse them. That's pretty much it. You can see more tutorials from other great artists at inPath.ca. My name is Peatr Thomas, and have a good one.